What's up, reefers? Happy Thursday. Today we have Desmond here talking about his aquascaping in his tank. And some of you may have seen that he invited me to his channel a couple of weeks ago, and we had a great conversation. So I thought it's a great opportunity to invite him into the Aquaforest Tank Talk and to talk a little bit more about his tank, his methods, his overall sense of belief when it comes to reefing, and how he made some of the decisions that he did when setting up this new lagoon tank. So first and foremost, Desmond, thank you for joining the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Appreciate it. And be happy to share some of the information I have in setting up the system.
Absolutely. And for those who may not follow you on Instagram, Sky High Reef, do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about the tank, how long it's been up, with the dimensions, and what you're using on the system.
Absolutely. So this tank is going on 4.5 months old since getting it started. It's a 150-gallon lagoon tank from Innovative Marine. It's 4 feet long. It's 3 feet wide, about 2 feet tall. It's on the APS stand. I'm using a Neptune Sky to light it. The entire system essentially was started with all Aquaforce products. It's using the salt, the sand, the rock, supplements, dosing. So I'm using an entire Aquaforce method, so to speak, on the system. I have a pretty decent-sized Fiji sump, running an oversized skimmer, clear water scrubber on it, and it's doing pretty well.
And for 4 months, and to look at that growth on there, you can see on the back wall the coral line on there. It's amazing. And I mean, we've talked a few times about how much I appreciate the depth of your tank, and having a 4x3x2 tank it's just like, it's amazing to be able to use that depth to full capacity. And I'm jealous. I really am.
So I've always had smaller tanks, and then you walk in and you see a large tank, and it looks like a big tank. But when you have a wide tank, it's something totally different. I definitely couldn't see myself not ever having a tank that was at least 3 feet wide.
It would be a dream of mine to be able to have one that wide as well. And I remember watching a little while back, Than over at Tidal Gardens had done a video of somebody in Texas, and his tank was 5 feet wide and 10 feet or 11 feet long. And he made a comment how fish interact differently with a wider tank.
Yes.
And I've never seen that personally, but in your experience, do you notice that your fish interact differently because of the depth?
I believe they can zone themselves out. So it's not a massive tank, but it is a very large tank. At 4 feet wide and 3 feet, 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, it is a large glass box, so to speak, right? It's very wide. It's not narrow. So I do find that the fish can zone themselves out. I don't have much aggression. I do have a top on it, but I would find it very hard to believe one of the fish would jump, just because there's so much space. The way I set up the rock work, it just gives you a lot more options.
I think your idea of zoning out is interesting when we think of not just sleep space, which is something I think we talk about today with negative scape tanks, but also like when they're just actively free swimming during the day and giving them the ability to move around. And I know we can start to see some of the fish in there, but what fish do you have in the tank at the moment?
So far, it's 4 months old, so we're getting started. But I have one wrasse that I've had with me probably going on 3 years now. So LeBuck's Ferry wrasse, common wrasse, but it's full grown now, has a lot of colors on it. I have 2 chromis. I have 2 clowns that I've had for a couple of years. I have 3 anthias, 2 females and a male, the lyre-tail. The male is nice. He actually has some nice streamers on him. He has the different colors, like half and half.
Yeah.
What else do I got in here? I have a blue spot the yellowfin goby with the shrimp. They've moved to the back somewhere, so I haven't seen them in a couple of days, but I know they're in there. And I have a lemon peel angel in here also.
So definitely fish that like their territory. So I think all of those in there are relatively territorial in their own space, probably with the clowns being at the top of that list. But I can now see when you talk about zoning being important, and I'm sure when you were thinking of the scape, you were also thinking about how do I create the spaces there to allow these fish, but also probably on your future fish list, everything that you want to be able to put in there and to allow them to be as peaceful as possible.
Yeah, and that was the good thing about being able to use this kind of rock, because I had the shelves, I had the caves, the different shapes, the way I was able to stack them. even if all the fish were on this just one side, there's enough caves and holes and underhangings where they could all hide.
Sure.
So essentially, because I do plan on stocking this tank with a lot of fish.
Yep.
A lot of spaces, because they just need a little crevice where they can get into and be able to sleep at night, or if they're scared, where instead of jumping out of the tank, there's so many dark little spots that they can go to that they take that as an alternative.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works out.
And in terms of flow, what are you running in there for flow at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm running one large Jabo 180 gyre.
Mm-hmm.
It's rated for, it says, up to 10,000 gallons per hour.
Yeah.
All the water in this tank is moving.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it behind you there on the left side.
And I can't even turn it all the way up, and it's pushing 4 feet. And I can't put it on full power. Down here, you see I got some sand missing, which I've actually come to like. The coralline's growing on the bottom of it, so I think it looks kind of cool going up,
Yeah, no, I definitely, I can see the movement in there, and the tank looks really good. It really does. And
thank you.
One of the things that we talked about in our last conversation was your diving experience and how you brought that from another hobby and passion of yours into your aquascaping. So for those who maybe didn't join on the other discussion who are joining here today, I'd love to hear a little bit about what was it about diving that gave you the inspiration to be able to create the tank that you did?
So with diving, I've had reef tanks longer than I've been diving. So when building Escape, it was always something that I saw on the internet or something I saw on the video, and you want to create these shelves. I've always liked the shelf look.
Yeah.
2 years ago, once I started going scuba diving, and you start going down into the reefs, it kind of changes your view on a reef tank once you actually go underwater and actually see it. To be able to see the way the sand is, how you see, a lot of times you see reef tanks and there's rocks everywhere and there's giant piles, but it actually doesn't really look like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot more shelving. Like if you have a cliff and it's coming down, you're shelving off that cliff, and then you just have sand. You might have a little island here, a little island there, but that shelf look, that from a distance look, was something I wanted to do. Being that I had a lagoon tank, I knew I could bring it down, and it would be the same way as when you're laying flat and you're looking up at it,
sure,
where you can see it going up a wall.
And I think that's not only the beauty of the way you've designed the tank, but also trying to mimic or emulate, nature.
Right.
I'd imagine that the fish, and again, I'm projecting here, but that they feel more comfortable. Right, it's something that you'd be more familiar with in the wild of how a natural scape would look, and again, I'm projecting a little, but I could have believed that they'd be a little bit more comfortable because it'd be something they'd.
It is something similar, I would think. A lot of times, even if you go snorkeling and you come off that sand and you get up to the rock, the fish aren't on the outside of the rock; they're inside of that rock. They're underneath the rock, right? They all swim away from you, and it could be 100 fish there, and they'll all disappear in a second. right? And they're inside of that rock. So I just think having that wall and having it shelved down, you can see it from a distance. Having some open sand space, it just gives it a very nice, more realistic look to it.
And do you find that you spend more time looking top down or looking, face on into the tank?
I look more from the face of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it's wide, so it feels deeper. I do look top down because now you can see it, right? From the top, it looks better. It looks a lot better, but it is a big tank, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit of an effort to take a top-down picture. I got to get a chair and all of that.
Sure.
From the top, it does look really cool, but I spend a lot of time looking at it from the front.
Yeah, one of the things that I always enjoy doing is, just looking from the side of the tank. So, when designing my 980. I not only designed it from front to back looking at it, but also from top down to see how the lights were going to interact.
Yeah.
But also from left to right, because for me, going in from the garage into the house, that's where I see the one pane of the glass. And so I wanted to be able to see things slightly differently. So similar to you with your depth, I wanted to see the levels and the stratification of the rock in a way that it's going to give me different perspective depending on where I'm looking. So I think that today, in new ways of scaping, and by new I mean in the last like 10-15 years, where we moved away from the rock wall on the back or the angle hinging down into more interesting and dynamic aquascapes. We've come to appreciate the aquascaping to be much more dynamic today than ever before.
And it's very doable, and it's not difficult, and it is for a lot of people set up their reef tanks, and you'll notice for months you move rocks, right? It's a very realistic thing. When I set this tank up, once I put it in there, I've moved the top rock once, and it was 2 inches to the left or 2 inches to the right. I didn't have to move it around because you set it up beforehand, and it's worth the extra time. What you build on your table is not exactly what's going to go inside of the tank, but for the most part, you have the main structures, and then you can kind of build it and move it as you put it inside of the system. But it's definitely worth the effort and the time. The fish all have their own areas. There's more flow. Although you see it and it looks like a lot of rock, I would say 90% of the rock is not even in the sand. So there's flow. There's nothing against the back wall. There's flow against the back, underneath it. And then all throughout the entire thing, there's swim throughs. So, you just have that depth. Sometimes I look at it from the front, and you see the brightly colored rocks, but then you have those dark spots underneath, and it just gives it a nice contrast to it.
And I haven't used personally the Neptune skylight, but one of the things that I've seen in feedback is it does create nice shadowing effects as well.
Yes.
And I can see it, looking at where your shoulder is at the moment. Where
you can see it, right? And it gives it a different kind of look. Because am I necessarily going to grow coral there? There are things I can put there, right, in the darker spots. Yeah. But just that difference in highlight, no light, super dark, it just looks really good, I think.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to this emulating nature, right? Because while the sun is able to penetrate down in all different levels as light is refracting, there's also shadows and caves and stuff in nature. And so again, I think that you've done a fantastic job of being able to recreate a scape that you would see while snorkeling or diving, because there's naturally occurring caves, but it also it gives your eye something to look at different as well, and to draw your eye into the scape in a different way.
Because you're not just staring at it, you're trying to look into it. You want to see what's under this rock. You're looking around, and it's a lot nicer. You have to get up close. What I've noticed is when, like, if I have the other day my daughter had a birthday party, a lot of people that were looking at the tank, they didn't stand back from it, right? They were super close onto the tank, right? They're trying to really look into it and see what's beyond, you know what I mean? Like what's in there. And it's just a better experience, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And my daughter is too, and I will give her I have those 4-inch magnifiers, and I'll give her that, and she'll hold on to it, and she'll go to the tank and she'll look around, and because she's so curious to see inside and the magnification of things. I can imagine, when people were looking at the tank there as well, they're like eyes wide open, trying to see. They're trying to see what's in those nooks and crannies, and there's something there that they wouldn't see along the top of the rock.
I love it. Again, just from an aquascaping standpoint, it's worth the time and the effort. Even in just doing it on coral placement, just based on where I was putting the rocks, I kind of knew what corals I wanted to put where. You can really create islands. You can kind of really create a long-term look for the tank.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you spent several months in the preparation and planning stages of it, as you went from your other tank to then setting up this one and then building it out. And so, while the tank may be 4 months old of water and life in it, I know you spent, or I believe you spent many, many more months.
I would say I spent maybe about 4 or 5 months just building out the tank. Maybe let's say 6 months building it out. I got an opportunity to be able to pick up this tank from another reefer, from DC Reefer. Yeah. And he made me an offer when he got the tank. So, I want to thank him for it. And then just from that point, I made a decision where I wanted a long-term tank. This is the biggest tank I've ever had. Yeah. I had no idea how big it actually was until I actually saw it, right? Because it's not a common tank. There are a couple other people that do have them, but it's not a very common tank. So when I saw it, it was a little overwhelming at first. So I sat in the garage for about a month, and then I started deciding what am I going to do. On the baseboard of the tank, right, the thing that's separating the tank from the stands, I drew out all of my plans.
Wow.
So I made a
I remember you posted some of the photos, and it looked like like a chalkboard painting, and it was super cool.
That's actually under here. So underneath the tank, it's the entire plans of the tank they're in there.
Part of the tank now.
So I thought I thought the whole thing out. I made a list of all of the parts that I wanted. I did a lot of comparisons of what do I want versus what do I need, what can I afford, what can I get, and just really took the time to build the tank out. I didn't set it up until I had, about 90% of everything that I knew I needed for it. And then I was able to transfer one tank over to another. I didn't have any real issues. And so far, it's been doing great.
And I think that preparation has paid off by leaps and bounds for you, right? To be able to get to where you are today. And I think a lot of reefers will spend some time thinking about that stuff. They'll figure out what equipment they may want to use from a previous build. But I can really see and hear the depth of thinking that you put into it, and really just analyzing and dissecting every component of it. And I remember those drawings that you had, and they were so thorough that I think it gave you a lot of the peace of mind to know that this is going to be a successful build because you thought through all the components.
I did, and it really is worth taking the time to do it, because I think a lot of people set up the tanks. One of the videos you watch, and it shows how many reefers stay in it for 1 year versus 2 to 3 years versus 5 to 10 years. And I think it's that initial setup that causes some of those problems, right? If you've never set up a reef tank and the first 6 months are hard, you're probably not going to make it to a year. But if you take a full month, take 2 months, really plan it out, you can really set up a tank that's going to last for years, and you don't have to touch it. I go sometimes a week and a half without having to touch anything on the tank. Cleaning the glass sometimes.
Do you have a rule about putting your hand in the tank, or do you use tongs? What's your philosophy when it comes to?
I put my whole hand goes in the tank. I don't even really think about it. I've never had a tank this size, so I assume the water volume. I do have a lot of filtration down below. I'm sure it has effects onto the tank. I wouldn't recommend it. It would be better if I use tongs. But I do put my hand in there. But I don't do it that often. Only when I'm adding new corals. For the most part, I don't really, it's kind of a carefree kind of tank at this point. I don't have to mess with it.
Sure. I was curious because, other people have to think when you have lids on your tank. So my previous tank, I didn't have a lid. And I was a lot more laxed about putting my hand in or using tongs, on a maybe not daily basis, but at least a few times a week.
That might be it. The lid might be the reason why.
And
I noticed a barrier.
Now, with the lid on the tank, and I'm just adding some sand back into it. And I was like, last night, I'm like, should I add more sand? I'm like, well, then I have to take the lid off, and then I have to do this. And I'm like, I'll do it tomorrow. And I feel like just having that slight barrier of the lid on there, while not
makes a difference.
Not complicated to remove, it was just that they're like, I don't really need to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And I'm curious whether that changes my behaviors in the future about how often I want to get in there and move stuff around. So
I think it really does. This is my first tank where I'm using a lid, and I just have a regular, lid on it. But I think keeping your hand out of the tank does help. I think if you stop messing with it so much, I think I'm as successful as I am because of the preparation that I did to set it up. Because now I don't have to mess with it. I don't go in the sump. I don't touch things. I don't have to turn them on and off, right? Everything is working as it should. So there's no reason for me to move anything around. Now, maybe if I put it like today, I put in some new frags. I'll put them where I put them. But as soon as I get them, I glue them down, right? I don't buy frags and put them on a frag rack and leave it for a month. I find a spot, I glue it in, I check it out a week later, see how it's doing, just because I don't want to have to move it. I don't want the temptation of touching it. And now you're moving this thing everywhere, and now you're moving them all around. I put them right in their spot where I want them to live, see if they're happy or not, and then change them out.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely the two camps on frag racks, and I've gone both ways on it. And I've actually contemplated in my 980 in the sump where it has for the ATO, and it's maybe 20 gallons, so it's pretty large. Of actually just using that as a frag rack system and putting some type of LED light over that space and use that as a frag system, because I don't want to put frag racks in the 980. I'd rather keep it simple and clean and go frag rack free for that. So that's one of the things that I'm contemplating in there.
Yeah,
I
I'm not a big fan of frag racks. If you could definitely put it in the sump, I would do that. Especially if you have enough space and you have the light, then I would like it there. But for the display, I'm just not a fan of. I don't see why you would do all of this work and then have something orange glowing on the side glass.
Sure.
For me, I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, every reefer has their own philosophy on that, and if they're growing it to sell it, I get it.
Yeah, in certain situations, it makes sense. For what I did, I wouldn't do it. For my type of display, what I want to grow out, I would definitely like a smaller frag tank on the side where I can have the racks and and grow out there. But for me, I want this to be a long-term display tank.
Yeah, is that part of your future plan to build either a connected in or a separate system next to it for frags?
Yes. Once I get to the point where I'm actually all of these small frags are big frags, I would like to put a matching small innovative marine, another small lagoon right next to it, and be able to grow out a frag system, and then just connect them, have them side by side. But I want to get a matching tank, right? Because they come in different sizes, so I want to get one of the smaller ones and have it right next to it.
Yeah, that'll be a nice extension to the tank, and when those little frags become bigger frags, that'll be nice.
That's the tricky part, right? But again, so far we're doing pretty good. Some of them are growing well. I don't plan on cutting any of them for a while. For me, the mark is the 1 year mark. That's what I'm shooting for. I don't want to touch anything that I put in the system for at least a year, and just see how big I can actually grow them. Can I grow a small frag into a giant colony?
Yeah, and for those of you who are looking at the tank, you can see Desmond has the Neptune sky in the middle of the tank there. You can see.
Get a little bit closer here.
There you go, and you can see how the light kind of falls off to the sides where he's got balances and softies there, and a really nice distribution of light going through the tank there, where obviously the center of the tank gets the predominant bulk of the intensity, but it fills that space really nicely for now. And in the past that we were talking about, adding a second light to the tank or not, but I think for now, I think that you're right. It's doing a nice job filling that space.
It's doing a great job, because again, although I'm not going to get hundreds of par down here in these corners, I don't need that much par down that low, right? Down here I have zoas and I have a cyphestria down here, but this is all going to be zoas. So how much par do I really need? If I have 50, if I have 100,
it'll be fine.
It'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
Up in this SPS area, right underneath the light, I'm gonna have the 200 or 300 par range for sure.
Sure. And I'm sure folks are thinking this. If not, we'll be asking soon enough. Where do you like to keep your parameters in the system?
So for right now, I've been keeping it super stable. I've been keeping it between 8.5 and 9 for my alk, because I am using the reef salt. So for the most part, I don't deviate from that. I'm staying in that range. For nutrients, now my nutrients are kind of funny. My nitrate has been 0 on the high range forever. But I believe that's due to I run an algae scrubber, I have an oversized skimmer.
Sure.
My phosphates generally run about 0.20.
Okay.
So they're not 0. So you would think maybe they should be flip-flop, because I'm going to eventually get algae. That's what the science says. Right. But I can show you the rock, and I don't have a single piece of algae growing inside of the system. No, my scrubber is packed.
Yeah.
So for as far as nutrients, that's where I keep mine. It's been working, so I haven't started dosing anything for nitrate to bring the value up, because I'm not having any negative effects. So there's no reason to change it. And that's what I'm going with on this build. I'm just going to be patient and don't change it if it's, if nothing bad is happening. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to just leave it alone.
And in terms of your husbandry of the tank, how often do you do water changes, and what volume do you like to do?
So on this system, I do a 20-gallon water change once a month. Okay. I probably have about 175 gallons total with the sump and the display. So I only do a 20-gallon. That's the bucket that I have, right? I have this big 20-gallon brute.
Yeah.
And I do one of those once a month. As far as dosing is concerned, I do everything based off of the out consumption because I dose the components 1, 2, 3 Pro.
Yep.
So whatever my alk is, that's the amount that we put inside of the system to keep that number stable. I don't test my calcium and magnesium unless I'm bored because I'm not going to change anything based on those numbers because I'm running off of the alk. But I do have the Aquaforest, the calcium up, the magnesium up. I can dose those in if I ever do a test and feel like I want to change it.
Yeah, and keeping the levels pretty stable between the 8 and 9. Your calcium is going to be probably in that 420 to 450 range anyway. So
it's going to be, and anytime I do test it, it's within the correct range. You know what I mean? I've never tested it and it was out. So for the most part, I just do everything based on alk. Try to keep my pH up high. I think those two things, if you can keep your alk super stable, you can keep your nutrients, whatever your nutrients are. If you can keep everything kind of the same, it's going to work. The trick to keeping it the same, though, is to stop messing with it.
Yeah, and I think your point that you first mentioned about stability is so important. We talk about numbers that probably too much and chasing numbers as opposed to focusing on stability. So it's great to hear that you talk about the stability first, and setting what those marks are, and then maintaining that. And then I'm sure you see that it paying its dividends in terms of your growth and your happiness of your corals.
For sure. Once you find that everyone's numbers are going to be different.
Yeah.
Because everyone's habits, everyone's products, everyone's regimen, they're all different. There's too many variables there to chase a very specific number. But you find that sweet spot. You find the thing that looks good, is working for you, and then you just hold those numbers. If I started seeing some adverse effects, maybe I'll look into my nutrients and bringing my phosphate down and raising my nitrates, right? And flip-flopping them. But if I did that right now, what kind of effect would I have? I don't know. Right now it looks pretty good, so we're gonna leave it.
And I think that's the thing is it's working out. It's successful at its goal at the time. As you get more fish, more coral in there, you'll see what the absorption is, and if there's a need to change that because it's working. And you look at the tank every day, so you'll be the first to see whether you need to change that.
So and I think it's just very important. I think if a person takes the time to really think out the build, really look into everything that they want, set the tank up properly, set it up right, take the time, you're going to be a lot more successful long term because I don't have to mess with it. I don't have to tinker. I don't have to test every single day. You set it up for success. So theoretically, it's going to be successful.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And going back to the component 1, 2, 3 and the 1, 2, 3 Pro, and I see Phillips here saying that he's been using it on his 58-gallon for years, and having great success. And one of the things that I'm going to do with my new build is I'm actually going to do the combination of the 1, 2, 3 Pro plus a calcium reactor. So I can get the balance of some of the nutrients that the 1, 2, 3 Pro give me. As well as have the extra stability from the calcium reactor. So the proportion I have to work out, but I'd imagine instead of dosing the full strength of 1, 2, 3, it'll maybe a third of it or a fourth or fifth.
For sure, because at that point you're kind of dosing for the trace out of it, more so than you're dosing for the calcium and or you're dosing for the alkalinity. So that could definitely work. For me, I'm just using the 1, 2, 3 Pro right now. I don't have to put too much because my frags are still small. Long term, that's exactly what you just said is what I plan to do. Once I have giant colonies, I want to add a calcium reactor to it, and then use the calcium reactor as the main source, and then supplement with the 1, 2, 3.
Exactly, and part of my rationale is because I decided in the past to use marble over the use of coral frags.
Right.
And for me, because the pure marble doesn't have any trace elements in it, I have to either use the degassing chamber with coral pieces or heavy supplement with trace elements. And
run another chamber.
Exactly. Yeah.
It could definitely work. And I think it'll be successful because you're going to have the stability from the calcium reactor, and then you're going to have everything else you need in it.
Yeah. So that's my plan there, is to be able to use them in conjunction, and again, playing with the degassing chambers with coral frags, and utilizing the marble in the main chamber, because for me, I just find it's a little bit more stable than using the
Right.
coral pieces, and it was a heck of a lot cheaper to buy, 50-pound bag of it for $10 at the hardware store than buy all the the coral frags, and sometimes it's harder to get these days.
Yep. It definitely works. So the 123, I like it. On a lot of bigger tanks, you start seeing a lot higher consumption of it. So that's why I went with the Pro. It lasts a little bit longer. It's more concentrated, so I can dose less. So you don't actually feel like you're dosing so much into the tank. But I've been using it for years, and so far I've been super successful with it. So that's why I stick with it.
Yeah, and something a lot of reefers don't know about the Pro is it also has something in it to help with boosting the pH as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the added benefit of a pH booster using the product, as well as needing to use a little bit less because it's more concentrated. Yeah, and speaking of pH, do you have a target pH that you like to keep within?
So far I've been very fortunate. I do have a CO2 scrubber, but I don't run it. The tank sitting where it is in my house usually sits between 8.2 and 8.5-ish.
Can't beat that.
Right?
You can't beat that. Knock on some wood there somewhere.
Yes. So sometimes, like if I have a bunch of people over and we're having a party and everyone's downstairs, or when I have the fireplace on, it drops to about 8.1. I haven't seen it dip below 8 though.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that's part of what is contributing to the corals growing. They are going to grow better and faster if you have higher and stable pH. I do think part of it is my skimmer. I have a giant oversized skimmer inside of the system. So when I turn that off, I sit right at 8, right? I'll be between 8 and 8.2. I turn that skimmer on, I'm at 8.2, 8.4.
And are you pulling outside air into the skimmer, or is it ambient air?
Air in from inside of the stand.
Okay.
So I do have a window right here next to the tank,
Mm-hmm.
and long term I wanted to make a little hole in the wall, run an automatic water change, all of that kind of stuff. So I will do that, but for right now it's sitting pretty good with the corals that I have in there. So just letting it go. It's working.
I think keeping that elevated pH in the parameters where you have them, definitely the recipe for success there, and being able to allow them to, give them every chance that they can to grow and to encrust and to be happy in that tank.
Yeah, and if I did need it, I do have the CO2 scrubber. It's ready to go. It's not going to give me a major boost, but if it can give me a 0.1 or 0.2, then that might take you to the next level, right? The difference between 7.9 and 8.1, it's a big difference, I think, in a reef tank.
Yeah,
So
yeah, especially with all the conversations lately, the higher you can keep it within reason, the 8.2 to 8.4 range, even day and night, the faster your corals are going to grow. So I think that there's definitely a lot to be said, and a lot of advancements in pH buffering that we're going to be seeing in the year ahead.
I like it. I've noticed nothing but positive with the higher pH. I actually moved to Georgia a year ago. When I was in Miami, I struggled with pH, right? I sat at 7.8 for years, no matter what I could do. And I just didn't get the growth. I would get the colors, they would be alive, but I'm not getting the growth that I'm seeing here now. I'm putting frags in and I'm seeing them growing.
Yeah, I think that, our understanding of pH has really advanced a lot in the last year, as more and more people are talking about it and discussing ways to elevate it. And I think we'll see that move forward in our tanks over the year ahead, and just how much new growth we get based out of higher, more stable pH.
Yes, sir.
So we'll definitely have to do a follow-up in this in a year, but hopefully within that time as well.
Yeah, definitely in between that time. But for me, anyone that's following my pages or following the tank, for me, that goalpost is the 1 year mark. A year from now, we should have a nice, beautiful reef here for sure.
And I won't keep you much longer, but one final question about, what is the vision for the tank beyond that 1 year mark?
So beyond the 1 year mark is I want to have giant colonies. That's the vision. The one thing I do want to add to it is, from that top-down perspective, I do want to add large mangroves. So that's the one thing I've been holding out. Some of these open sand spots, I've been thinking about putting a giant tree coming out of it. I could hang the lights from the roof instead of using the RMS mount.
Sure.
I could light the whole thing from up top, grow some big mangroves out of it. I think that would be something very unique. You know,
Have you,
the
knowing that
branches.
mangroves grow so slow, have you started getting some and trying to grow them yet?
Yes, I've tried that, and I haven't been successful with it so far. So I'm trying to actually source
Bigger one?
a bigger one. I'm trying to find something that's massive, you know, where I could actually have all of the roots going across in here, and it'll just give it a real different look. So I'm trying to find a full grown tree first, but that's a long term goal.
I think that'll look really cool, especially seeing the fish and the chromis and Andeas swim through the roots of the mangrove. I think it'll look really awesome.
Yeah. So I think that's what's going to take this tank to the next level. But first, I'm going to try and grow some of these corals.
Well, definitely, Desmond. I appreciate you taking the time to share us where your tank is at today and some of the growth plans and advancements in the future. That mangrove is going to look pretty badass. So we'll definitely have to yeah, stay tuned on that. And for those of you who are not following Desmond on his Instagram, Sky High Reef, check it out. He's got some awesome content. He does weekly podcasts as well. Join them. He's doing some really cool stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and to share your thoughts about your tank and the hobby at large.
Very much appreciated. Anyone wants to join us can check us out tonight, every Thursday night at 9 p.m. with Reef X Coral. We do the Reef Experience. My page is the Sky High Reef, and be welcome to join and follow along.
Fantastic. And again, those of you who joined, feel free to leave any of your thoughts, comments, questions, subscribe below. And thank you for those of you who keep coming back every week to watch. Philip, appreciate your time and your comments as always. So guys, happy reefing. We'll talk to you soon.